You can hear me and see me and all that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, here we are. Good morning.
Good morning.
A beautiful day. We're all we're all here sharing this moment. Maybe I'll show you this. This is this week's last week's Science magazine, and there's a few interesting articles in it. One is about the genes. What are the genes? In every cell of our body, well, almost every cell, we don't have genes in our red blood cells. Why not? Because the red blood cells have to get through very tiny spaces, so they don't need things to clog them up, to bulk them up, so they can go where they want to go. Anyway, most cells have genes in them which are information. In most every cell of the body, we have all the information for the whole body. If you took a skin cell, for example, you would be able to reconstruct your whole body from that one skin cell. At least theoretically, we cannot do that today, but maybe in the future we will be able to do that. But that's an amazing understanding that the information for our entire bodies is held in each cell, which means that you have volumes and volumes of information that's stored in every single cell, or almost every cell. So, I mean, that's the information. What does this information do? It tells the cells how to construct themselves, how to make the proteins that are necessary. Excuse me. Oh,
Hey, Gary,
yeah.
I have a question. Because you mentioned
Yes.
that stem cells, uh, you can reproduce a person's body, the whole thing, with one skin cell.
Yes.
Really, I know you said they're not really doing that, but is that cloning? Aren't they doing cloning? Does that have something to do with cloning?
Yes. Yes. That's how they do cloning.
Right.
They take a cell. I'm not sure which cell. Um, and they can reproduce an entire animal from that single cell, which is mind-boggling, right? I mean, how is that possible? And yet, when you think about it, we all start out as a single cell, right? We have the egg cell from the mother and the sperm cell from the father, and that cell is just one cell, and that's how we all begin. And sooner or later, we turn into 30 trillion cells. How amazing is that? And not only do we have 30 trillion cells, but we have 200 different kinds of cells that make up who we are, like our skin, the blood, the bones, the kidney cells, lung cells, heart cells, nerve cells, cells in our eyes, um, you name it. We have so many different kinds of cells that are each operating in a special way to create who we are. And how could that have ever come about? It's really mind-boggling to think how we went from very simple life in the beginning, um, say 3 billion years ago or so. We all there was bacteria, tiny, tiny cells, smaller than the cells of our body, much smaller, and that's all there was on the earth. You couldn't even see the life on the earth, except maybe you would see some kind of coloration on the rocks or on the surface of waters. But other than that, there were no trees, there were no animals, no birds, no fish, um, no flowers. Um, it's interesting to think the world existed for about 2 billion years, just like that. And then a new type of cell came along that changed everything. And we are the inheritors of that type of cell. And this new type of cell, we have no real idea why it came about, but it was bigger than the bacteria by 1,000 times, and it could do things the bacteria could not do, like exchange the information it had within it's in itself. It could exchange information much better, and it had a bigger storage of information, and it was able to transform the world. And the life we see around us today is the result of that new type of cell, which was one of the greatest revolutions in the history of life. Any questions, my dears?
Questions?
I can't quite hear you. Marla, what did she say?
Actually, she said, when was it all done? Like, how did this all happen? Right.
How did this all happen? Now that's a wonderful question. How did this all happen? Well, we can go back to the beginning, which is the Big Bang, we call it, which is the start of the universe. And in the start of the universe, the first things to appear were the atoms. But these atoms were just hydrogen and helium. So you can't make, a bird out of hydrogen and helium, or a fish, or a tree, or a human being. But that's all there was. In fact, there were no stars yet. For several hundred million years, the universe was dark and just filled with gas, hydrogen gas and helium, and then this gas started to pull together, and as it pulled together, it formed the first stars and eventually the first planets. And while it was doing that, um, as the stars were burning, they were creating new types of atoms. So that now we had things like lithium and carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and phosphorus and gold and silver and all the things that we have around us today were atoms that were created as stars burn their fuel. How amazing is that? I mean, that's truly mind-boggling. You really, it's like hard to understand how any of this could ever happen by itself. That seems to be a principle behind this universe. There seems to be something driving the universe. And we have called it God. We have called it um, um, different names, but um, there is something seemingly intelligent about the universe. If you take a look at almost anything in the universe, you can see a intelligence or a design behind it. Um, so the question is, how is this possible? Is one of the greatest questions people have ever asked. So I'm glad you asked this question. Um, Indeed, the very appearance of the universe is a very remarkable event. Why should there be anything rather than nothing? Hmm? How could how could something have come into existence? And this is quite extraordinary to think about. And not only something came into existence, but a world that promotes life and promotes consciousness. We are the inheritors of a world that has taken nearly 14 billion years to get to this moment. Imagine that. I thought I was pretty old, but it took 14 billion years to get to this moment when human beings have arisen on the earth and can now think about the earth. It's like the earth itself is thinking about itself, you could say, or the universe is thinking about the universe. How amazing is that? Um, let's see. Um, there's an interesting story in this little book here. This book is called The Cell, and it has all sorts of information about how the cells work, how they are very intricate machines that are constantly um, in activity. Every cell in the body is constantly in activity. It's working with other cells, it's doing jobs, and it's also replacing its own parts. How amazing. The cells in our body can replace their own parts. A car cannot do that, right? But the cell is able to recreate itself all the time from its internal design. It's totally mind-boggling. If you take the skin, for example, we have a few pages about the skin in this book, and the skin, which is a wonderful protecting organ of the body. It's this book says the skin is the largest organ of the body. It's covered 2 meters, or about what's a meter? 3 by 3. Um, so you have 3 to 6 by 6 is 18 square feet. So the skin is 18 square feet, and it's made of 24 layers, right? And that's amazing. 24 layers in which cells um, work their way up from the bottom to the top. And by the time they get to the top, they have changed into something remarkable. The surface of the skin is covered with special cells that are like our fingernails, or our hair, or the feathers of birds. All of these things are made of the same stuff. And this is a special type of cell that only lasts for about a day, and then it leaves the body. It just falls off. We don't even notice it because the skin cells are so tiny. Um, I forget, there's 10,000 of them can fit around the head of a pin, the size of a head of a pin, and we're losing um, millions and millions of skin cells on the surface of our skins every day, and that helps to clean the body. It helps get rid of bacteria that has come onto the skin and would become a problem in time, but the skin, because it's letting itself go, and takes the bacteria with it. Um, Most of the house dust that we find around us is actually skin cells that we have let go of. It's really quite something. Um, any questions or comments? So, so that's just one type of cell that we have in the body. The skin has that's just one type of cell, and as I mentioned, that these cells um, well can change over time, um, but the body has 200 different kinds of cells, and each of those performs a special job, like the blood cells, which are able to pick up oxygen from the outside and bring this oxygen to all the parts of the body, where the oxygen is then used to create energy for the body. Um, the reason we breathe is very complex, and how we use oxygen is um, is not the way that most people think about it. Um, I'm not going to talk about it today, but it's a very complicated thing, and it has to do with how oxygen pulls electrons through the membranes of cells and thereby creates the conditions that lead to the formation of energy in the body. Um, anyway, it's really a wonder, but the wonder starts with the atoms that surround us. Oxygen and nitrogen and carbon, all these atoms that were made in the stars play specific roles in the every life and all life forms on the earth. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it, because that means, I think, that the very foundation of the universe, the atoms, somehow are programmed to create the living world. That the atoms are designed in such a way that if you took any one of them away, the whole thing would collapse. Right? If you took out carbon, for example, which we find in the air, the carbon, if you took that away from the world, life couldn't exist. Life couldn't exist without oxygen, for many reasons. One of the reasons is that oxygen makes up water, right? Hydrogen and oxygen make water, and without water there would be no life. So we are dependent on these atoms for their qualities and their abilities to make life possible. Any questions or comments? All right, so let's move on. We So there is another interesting article in this magazine, this science magazine, about the way life changes over time. And we are finding out more and more that the ability to change, that is, to go from different life forms, for example, um, the um, the whale. We now know the whale was once an animal that lived on the shore, that it walked around and breathed the air the way a hippopotamus does, and even looked like a hippopotamus. But that whale somehow went back to the ocean and became a whale. Now, how did it become a whale? Well, the body has an ability to change and to become part of the environment that surrounds it. For example, the whale, or the animal that became the whale, had to grow um, flippers to swim around in the water. It had to it had to create a, a, a kind of insulation, which we call blubber, around the body to protect it from the cold of the sea. And it had to move its nose from the front to the top of its head so that it could breathe air as it moved along the surface of the water. Now, these are remarkable changes, and we're knowing more and more that these changes take place first in the genes, in this information that we find in all the cells. And the genes have the abilities to change and to create new life forms, so that dinosaurs ultimately became birds. How amazing is that? The birds we see around us today are actually dinosaurs that are leftovers from the time of the dinosaurs. It's quite remarkable. Um, there's an article in this magazine about the chicken. The chicken was domesticated, we say, or um, um, uh, changed by human beings from a scrawny bird that lived in the jungle into today's um, meaty meaty bird we call the chicken. And this first happened in the south of China, where these birds, we still find these birds walking around in the jungles there, but they're more like, you would find very little meat on them. But somehow people took these birds and they made them into the modern chicken. The same thing with dogs, which we believe were once wolves. And these wolves were somehow tamed by human beings and eventually turned into dogs. Um, how amazing, right? I mean, how do you turn a wolf into a chihuahua? You know? That's a pretty good trick. But the trick lies in the genes, in the information that we have in our cells. The trick lies in the ability of life to change over time. That's one of the great stories of discovery, that we know now that life is flexible, that life changes, that life becomes different things. The fish swam around in the sea, and we think at some point the fish developed the ability to walk on the land, that it actually just sort of hopped. But it had some new type of fin that was more like an arm than a fin. And it also developed a lung out of its, um, they call it a swim bladder. It's just like a big bag inside a fish that helps it to swim at various levels. Um, but that became a lung in a type of fish. And then that fish gave rise to an animal that could live outside of the water, which is quite remarkable. And that led to um, things like reptiles and amphibians and frogs and snakes and all kinds of things that changed into the life we see today. Um, and you could say that we too came from that fish. Um, any questions or comments?
Question?
Yes, a question? Question? Okay. So, so how do we understand all of this? How can we comprehend this? And there are different ways to understand it. The scientist may have one way. The religious person may have a different way. And the um, the the way we understand the world is true for each of us, regardless of where we come from. Um, to the religious person, the world is a sacred place. The world is full of God. The world is full of the mystery of life and the mystery of creation. Um, I think I'll read a poem right now. And this is my favorite poet, Mary Oliver, who, while wasn't a member of any particular religion, she saw the universe and nature as sacred, as holy, and all things in the universe as part of God. And let's see if I can find a poem that that talks about that. Um, let's see. Let's see. Um, Here is a poem called Lingering in Happiness. After many days, after rain, after many days without rain, it stays cool, private, and cleansed under the trees. And the dampness there, married now to gravity, falls branch to branch, leaf to leaf, down to the ground where it will disappear, but not, of course, vanish, except to our eyes. The roots of the oaks will have their share, and the white threads of the grasses and the cushion of moss, a few drops, round as pearls, will enter the mole's tunnel. And soon so many small stones, buried for 1,000 years, will feel themselves being touched. And it's a very beautiful poem, I think, that is an example of how everything is interconnected and everything feels each other. The, the water falling from the branch, from leaf to leaf, down to the ground. The roots of the oaks will have their share of this water, and the white threads also of the grasses, and the cushion of moss. A few drops, round as pearls, will enter the mole's tunnel, and soon many small stones, buried for 1,000 years, will feel themselves being touched. I think sometimes human beings can be like small stones and feel themselves being touched by the universe. Um, the sun, the air we breathe, the ground under our feet are all miracles, are all wonders, are all inexplicable. And they are with us all the time, supporting us, making us happen, making life thrive, making children being born into the world. Hmm? I want to thank all of you for being in class today. It's really special for me to be able to come to you and to feel that you are uh, in a conversation about things that maybe people don't talk about too often, but are very real and are important. And I want to thank you. So we'll try to get together again next week, and I hope you will be you'll be well, and I'll be well, and we'll be together again next week. So thank you so much for your time today and your interest, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Um, so take care, and it's great to see everybody. Um, Thank you so much for being in class. We'll see you next time. Bye bye now. Thank you, Marla. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'll see you next week.
I hope so.
All right.
Take care and be well. I like that cross you're wearing there.
Thank you. It
All
worked.
right. Take care.
All right.
So long, Frank. All right. I'm going to leave the meeting now.
All right.
Hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista, baby.